The wind has always had a name. It just forgets it sometimes. That's what my father used to say, squatting in the damp rot of the forest floor, palms in the mud like he was listening with his skin. He'd tilt his head slightly, eyes closed, and breathe through his nose, as though he were deciphering some riddle that the rest of the world couldn't hear. "Not all winds speak," he whispered once, his voice trembling with reverence, "but when they do, it's usually because someone's forgotten how to listen." I used to believe him. I used to think the wind leaned close to our broken house on Hickory Hill, not because it wanted to tear it down, but because it wanted in. That it wasn't shrieking. It was mourning, crying, speaking, like my father claimed it did, though never in English. The windows would rattle with its grief, and I'd lie in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, eyes wide, heart open, waiting for it to say my name. Now I know better. Now I wear a suit to work. I make coffee in a machine that beeps, not percolate. I nod politely when my colleagues talk about quarterly projections and global markets. I have a son who I tell real stories to, sensible stories, stories with facts, not magic, the kind that build foundations, not dreams. But the truth is, I'm a liar, because when he came to me last night, his little fists curled like dying petals, voice quaking as he said, "Daddy, there's something whispering in my room." Something inside me cracked, not with fear, but with memory. I told him it was the house settling, or maybe the heat kicking in. That's what a sane father says. But I remembered the wind, the way it pulled at my father like it wanted to wear him. The way he used to walk the ridges behind our home, talking to himself or to something I couldn't see. How? When I was 6, I asked him if it ever answered. How he smiled, sad and soft, and full of something I didn't have a word for then, and said, "Every time." My father vanished when I was 15. He left behind his boots, muddy and rotting on the porch, and his notebook. That was all. No note, no trace. The sheriff said maybe he walked too far and fell into a ravine. Mom said he probably went off his meds again and got lost in one of his goddamn fairy tales. And I said nothing, because inside I believed he'd gone into the wind. Literally, not metaphorically. It's a stupid belief. It's embarrassing. It clings to me like a burr I can't pick free. I've buried it under years of therapy and pragmatism, under textbooks and spreadsheets, under the weight of fatherhood itself. But last night my son, Eli, told me he heard a name in the air, and it wasn't his. It said Tameron, he whispered. My heart stopped, because that's what my father used to call the wind when it was angry. Tameron said it meant the one who forgets, in the old tongue. I used to laugh at that, the old tongue. What old tongue? Dad never explained, just winked and said, "You'll remember it when it matters." I never did, until now. So today, after I dropped Eli off at school, watched him walk toward the red brick building with his Spider-Man backpack bouncing on his shoulders, I didn't go to work. I drove west. The ridgeline behind Hickory Hill is still there, though the house is gone, torn down 5 years ago after a storm ripped through and scattered its bones like brittle ribs across the earth. The land is overgrown, thick with thistle and memories I don't want, but I park anyway, and I step out, and the wind hits me like a slap. It doesn't moan, it whispers, and I swear to God it says my name. I don't want to believe it. I'm a father now, a man of reason, but belief isn't about want, it's about recognition. And some part of me, the part I've tried so long to drown, stirs like a wolf in winter. I hike the ridge. Every step crunches with old leaves and older ghosts. The trees lean in like gossips, rustling with secrets, and my father's voice trails me, buried deep in memory. This forest remembers, son, not like you and me. It remembers in silence, in shadow, in shape. I find the glade by accident, or fate. I don't know which anymore. It's smaller than I recall, ringed with birch and silence. In the center, an old stump bleeds resin like a wound that won't close. This is where he used to sit, where he'd tell his stories. Stories of the wind kingdoms, of the breathless ones who ride on storm clouds and steal names, of the wind called Tameron, who once forgot its own purpose and broke a mountain in grief. Stories I once loved and now can barely stand to remember. I sit, and I speak. I don't know why I'm here, I say aloud. But my son, he's hearing things. He said your word, Tameron. He's hearing it, and I don't know what to do. The air stills, like it's listening. I need to understand. I need to know what you were trying to tell me all those years. I need to know if you were crazy or if you were just alone. If you left because you had to or because you couldn't stand to stay. I need to know if you're dead. A bird cries out, a high, warbling shriek, and then wind. Sudden, fierce, it rips through the clearing like a blade, bending the trees sideways. My heart hammers. I stand, spinning, breath shallow, and in the corner of my eye, I see him, a figure, just for a second, long coat, bare feet, silver hair like wire, standing between two birch trees watching me. Then he's gone. I stumble toward where he was. Nothing, just leaves, bark, absence, but in the mud beneath one tree, a footprint, fresh, and next to it, a torn page, from his notebook. I pick it up with shaking fingers, scrawled in his jagged, looping hand. Tameron has remembered. The wind is waking. You are not too late. I don't breathe for a full minute. And then, I laugh, harsh, disbelieving, broken. Because my son is hearing voices, because my father may not be dead, because the wind has started speaking again, and because I think I might finally be ready to listen. I drove back in the dark. Not home, not yet. I drove nowhere, circling back roads like they might peel open and offer a map. My hands gripped the wheel hard enough to tremble. The page my father left, or that the wind left, I still don't know, sat on the passenger seat like a burning thing. You are not too late. That phrase gnawed at me, like I'd missed something once, and hadn't even known. The wind outside sounded different now, not just louder, intention, purposeful, as though something had pulled taut a thread across time, and was plucking it, waiting for me to feel the vibration. I didn't sleep that night. Eli did, curled against me on the couch, a pile of blankets cocooning him. He muttered in his dreams. I heard it, just once. Tameron, and then he shivered and fell silent. I sat beside him until morning, knees drawn up, the notebook page clutched in one hand, the other resting lightly over his chest to feel it rise and fall. My son, my tether to reality, my undoing. I called in sick, said there was a family emergency, and maybe it wasn't a lie. At dawn, I went up to the attic. I hadn't been there since we moved in. It was still full of boxes that smelled like old wood and mildew. Most were untouched from the move, but one, I remembered its weight before I even opened it, labeled in my mother's handwriting. Micah's things, my father's name, a name I hadn't said aloud in years. Inside his notebook, the real one, the rest had been torn pages, scattered thoughts, but this was the Book of Winds, as he called it, bound in leather, etched with a strange symbol I once asked him about. It's the spiral of listening, he told me. It's how the wind folds in on itself to speak. At the time, I'd nodded. Now the absurdity of that explanation burned like shame, but I opened it. Page after page, drawings of wind patterns, glyphs, names, Tameron, Wuthon, Selith, stories of talking gales, of northern breezes, who stole voices and southern winds, who carried forgotten names to the sea. Myth made fever dream, and then toward the middle, a story I didn't remember, a boy who hears too early. The page was covered in tight script, uneven but frantic. My father's voice, unmistakable in tone even through ink. There will come a child who hears the silence behind the noise, who feels the air's breath not on his skin, but in his bones. He will speak to the wind without knowing. He will summon without summoning, and the wind will come, hungry, forgotten, remembering. The boy will not know what he is until he is nearly lost. My fingers curled around the page, my lungs tightened. He'd written this years before Eli was born. I slammed the book shut, and then I called my mother. Hello? Her voice was as brittle as autumn leaves. It's me. A pause. Well, that's a surprise. I need to talk to you about Dad. Another pause. Shorter. Now? Now. The drive to her apartment took 40 minutes. It was in the city, a flat, beige building filled with silence, and people waiting to forget. She opened the door slowly. She hadn't aged so much as folded. Her eyes were still sharp though. Always. I thought we weren't doing this again, she said, stepping aside. I didn't come to argue. Sure you didn't. She brewed tea without asking me. Earl Grey, always Earl Grey. Her hands shook slightly as she poured. Not from age, from memory. Did he ever tell you? I asked. About a wind named Tameron? She stopped pouring. The air in the kitchen thickened. Yes, she said finally. Too many times. What did he mean by it? She sat across from me, tea untouched. He meant madness, dressed up as mythology. That was your father. Always putting a crown on his illness. I wanted to yell. I wanted to shake her. What if it wasn't? Her lips tightened. Then he abandoned us for a fairy tale. I took out the notebook page, the fresh one, held it up. She didn't look. She didn't need to. I burned the rest, you know, after he left. I couldn't have that filth in the house, polluting you. But it didn't work. No, she said. And finally, her eyes met mine. It didn't. That night, I told Eli a story. Not a real one of my father out a wind named Tameron, who once forgot its own name, and so tried to steal others, about a boy who whispered his name back to the wind and made it remember. Eli didn't say a word until the end. Did it stop hurting people, once it remembered? Yes. I lied. It just wanted to be known. He looked at me then, with something too old for his face. I think it knows me, Daddy. My hands went cold. What do you mean? I think it waits for me to sleep. That night, I stayed by his bed. I didn't sleep, neither did the wind. And just before dawn, it spoke again. This time, I heard it too, clear as breath. Micah's son, hear me? I didn't tell Eli I'd heard it too, not yet. We ate breakfast in silence. He picked at his cereal like he was afraid of it. I asked if he slept well. He nodded. We both lied to each other with our eyes. There are things you say to keep your child safe, and there are things you say because you're too scared to admit you don't know how to protect them anymore. When I dropped him off at school, he looked at me through the car window a moment longer than usual, his face pale and drawn like the morning had already asked too much of him. I wanted to scoop him back into my arms and say, don't go. Stay with me, we'll run somewhere the wind can't reach. But instead, I smiled and waved, and the second he disappeared through the school doors, I called in sick again. Third day. My boss didn't bother hiding the irritation. Everything all right at home? Not really. You want to talk about it? No. Click. I drove back to the ridge. The sky was overcast, thick with the smell of damp earth and old rain. As I walked, the wind trailed behind me like a leash I hadn't realized I was tethered to. It didn't speak this time, not with words, just that pressing sensation, like the air itself was waiting for me to make a mistake. Back in the glade, I searched for more pages, more signs, nothing. But the stump where my father used to sit, something had changed. The moss was scraped away, a carving spiral, the spiral of listening, fresh, carved with care. I touched it, and the wind surged. I dropped to one knee, dizzy. The trees groaned like they were remembering something they'd spent years trying to forget. A cold swept through me, not physical cold, but the kind that comes when you realize your story doesn't belong to you anymore. I whispered, I'm listening, and then the world was silent. Not quiet, silent, the kind of silence that rings, that hums, that erases. No birds, no rustle, not even my breath. And in that vacuum, a memory. I'm 10, sitting beside my father on this very stump. He's holding my hand, telling me the story of Seleth, the southern wind, who carried names to the sea so they wouldn't be forgotten. He looks down at me, and there are tears in his eyes. I ask him why he's sad. Because, he says, sometimes the wind takes more than names. I blinked and the memory vanished like smoke. In its place, another page, folded beneath a rock at the base of the stump. I unfolded it with fingers that no longer felt like mine. When he begins to dream in the tongue of wind, the veil will thin. Do not let him sleep too long. Not in the house, not where the walls remember. I drove home like a man being chased by time. Eli wasn't in class. The school said he'd left before lunch. No calls, no messages, just gone. The blood drained from my face. I called the police. They asked if I had custody, if I had a history of domestic issues, the kind of questions that make you realize how thin the line is between worry and suspicion. I drove back home, and I found the front door open. Inside, silent, not the peaceful kind. The kind that creeps, the kind that holds its breath. Eli, nothing. I found him in the attic, sitting beside the open box, the book of winds in his lap, his eyes wide and vacant like something was looking through him instead of out of him. Eli, he blinked slowly, then turned to me. Daddy, it told me your name. My chest tightened. What? It said you were Micah's son, but that you forgot. I didn't forget, baby. You stopped listening. And then he smiled, but not like Eli. Like something wearing Eli. I lunged forward, grabbing him by the shoulders. You need to wake up, okay? Snap out of it. This isn't real. but he just blinked again, slowly, like a curtain falling, and whispered, "It's not the wind that's dangerous, it's the silence between." He collapsed against me, limp, and behind me the wind slammed the attic door shut. I didn't move for a long time. Eli lay crumpled in my arms, warm but still, his chest rising with shallow breaths. My ears rang, not with sound but with the echo of the slammed door, the finality of it. I pressed my forehead to his, tried to will him back. His skin was cold with something more than air. The attic light flickered, and then it went out. Only a faint blue haze remained, not from the windows but from the spiral etched into the leather cover of the Book of Wind. It pulsed, soft, rhythmic, almost like it was breathing. I reached for it. My fingers tingled before they touched the leather, like something reached out first. I opened the book. The pages flipped themselves, a flurry of parchment and glyphs and ink-stained dreams, until it stopped on a page I'd never seen before. Blank, at first, then words, scrawling across it in real time. My father's handwriting. "He is not lost, not yet, but the veil is thinner than you know." I swallowed. "Where is?" I whispered. The ink bloomed again, fast, sharp, alive. "Where the wind gathers names, where silence drinks memory. Bring him to the place you first heard me." I stared. Where I first heard, the ridge, the clearing, the glade where my father once told stories to the trees. I scooped Eli into my arms. He was heavier than I remembered. Not physically, weight of meaning, of burden. His head lolled against my shoulder, breath shallow but steady. I carried him downstairs. Every stair creaked like it was warning me. Outside, the sky had gone copper. Wind churned in strange directions, swirling the trees instead of bending them. I carried Eli into the car, buckled him in, whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. The drive was silent. No music, no radio. The hum of the tires was the only tether I had to the world I used to believe in. We reached the glade just before dusk. I parked at the edge of the path and lifted him again. His arms dangled, his eyelids fluttered. As I stepped into the woods, the wind circled me, not against me, with me, like it knew, like it remembered. The clearing waited. The stump, the spiral, and the figure. Not my father, or not fully. He stood tall, older, his hair longer, streaked with bone white and rusted gold. Barefoot, cloak rippling behind him in a wind I couldn't feel. His eyes were the same. "Micah," I said. He smiled. "You remembered. I never forgot." "You did, but that's not a sin. Forgetting is part of surviving." He stepped closer, looked down at Eli. "It's starting again," I said. "Whatever this is." He nodded. "It never stopped." "What do I do?" Micah crouched beside the stump, touched the spiral. "Names," he said. "That's where it begins. The wind is full of them. Lost names, forgotten names. When someone listens, really listens, they offer their own name in return. That's the price." He looked up at me. "You offered yours when you were 10. You just didn't realize it." I shook my head. "I never meant to. No one ever does." He pointed to Eli. "He offered his too. Not out loud, in dreams. That's how Tameron finds them. Through cracks in the veil, through silence." I crouched beside him. "Can I take it back?" Micah's eyes went dark. "Not take it, but you can share the burden, split the name, half for him, half for you." I stared. "And what happens to me?" He looked at me like a man watching a star fall. "You'll hear it all. Every voice the wind has ever carried, every scream, every lullaby, every lost name looking to be known." "I can't leave him alone in it," I said. Micah nodded. "Then say it." I took a breath that felt like a lifetime. "Tameron," I said, "take me, too." The wind howled, not angry, hungry. The glade trembled. Eli gasped, eyes snapping open, pupils wide and full of sky, and I felt it rushing through me, filling me, splitting me like light through a prism. 1,000 voices, 1,000 winds, all knowing my name. Micah caught me as I fell. "You'll forget things," he whispered, "small things. The taste of coffee, the weight of a normal day, but you'll remember him, and that will be enough." Darkness closed in, and in the silence that followed, Eli spoke. "Daddy?" "Yes," I croaked. I remember your name." When I woke, it was rain, a soft threadbare drizzle that made the glade steam like breath. Eli sat beside me, arms wrapped around his knees, watching, waiting. His eyes were clear, too clear. "How long was I out?" I asked. He tilted his head. "A little while. The wind stopped shaking after you fell." I pushed myself upright. My bones felt older, not sore, remembered, as if they'd been asked to carry someone else's memories.
I blinked the fog out of my vision and looked around. The glade was empty. No spiral on the stump. No Micah. He left, Eli said, as if reading my thought. Micah? He nodded. He said it was your turn now. A chill slipped down my spine. I looked at my hands. They looked the same, but they didn't feel like mine. When I flexed my fingers, I heard faintly whispers, not voices, not yet, but like pages rustling in another room. We need to go, I said. This place, it remembers too much. Eli stood, took my hand. It was a small thing, but I gripped it like it was the last real thing in the world. We didn't talk on the way back, not until we reached the car. Daddy, he said, just as I buckled him in. Can I still hear the wind? I paused. Do you want to? He looked out the window, rain sliding down the glass in slow, thoughtful trails. I think it's lonely. I shut the door, took my place behind the wheel, and for a long while, I didn't start the engine. Because I heard it too, not the wind, the loneliness. It crept into the spaces between my ribs, into the silence between heartbeats, the weight of inherited myth pressing into the shape of fatherhood. I drove us home, and something followed. That night, Eli slept soundly. I didn't. I stayed up with the Book of Winds, paging through its brittle, time-worn leaves. The ink shimmered now. New text appeared between lines like thoughts sliding between cracks. Names I didn't recognize, places I didn't remember visiting, feelings that weren't mine. That's what the wind does, I began to realize. It collects, it curates, it doesn't forget. But it does misplace. And when someone like me steps too far in, it starts to confuse its memories with mine. At midnight I found a new entry, one I didn't write, but it was dated tomorrow. He will speak the name again, not in fear, not in madness, but in surrender, and the wind will take what it is owed. I slammed the book shut. In the corner of the room a breeze stirred. No windows open, no vents blowing, just a thin spiral of air, slow and searching. Enough, I whispered. Not now, not with him here. The spiral vanished, but the message remained. The wind knew where we were, and it remembered the price.
The next morning, I took Eli back to my mother's apartment. She wasn't happy to see me, but when she saw him, his pale face, his two old eyes, she didn't argue. I need to go back, I told her. There's something I have to find. Her jaw clenched. You're not dragging him into this again. I'm not. She looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was lying. Maybe I wasn't sure either. What exactly are you trying to find? She asked. I met her gaze, the place he went. Her face drained of color. You think you can bring him back? I don't know, but I think he left something behind. And I think I'm the only one who can carry it. She didn't answer. She just reached down, touched Eli's cheek, and turned away. That was her blessing. The ridge was colder now. The Hustinsa. It felt like walking into a dream I hadn't finished. I found the glade, but it wasn't the same. No stump, no spiral, just a hollow in the earth, like a mouth long closed. And in the center, an object I'd never seen, a stone totem, worn by wind and time, carved with a spiral. But this one bled light, faint, flickering. I approached. The wind tightened around me. It whispered names, thousands, not out loud in my head, in my blood. I fell to my knees. The totem pulsed, and a voice, Micah's, filled the air. Now you carry the gate. What gate? I gasped. The one between silence and storm. I reached out, touched the totem, and in that instant I saw everything. The storms that devoured ships, the cries of children lost in the woods, the lullabies mothers sang into the wind, hoping someone might remember them, all of it, in me. The wind named me, and I answered, not with words, but with surrender. The totem cracked, split, sank into the ground, and I knew what I was now, the new keeper, the one who listens, the one who remembers, the one who will never sleep again without hearing every name the wind has lost. The wind hasn't stopped whispering. It hums beneath my skin, deep in the marrow of me. I don't hear it like before. It's not a sound anymore. It's a shadow that stands just outside the door. Patient, ancient. I try not to meet its gaze when I catch it in the corner of mirrors. 3 days have passed since I touched the totem, or maybe it's been one long sleepless night. I've stopped counting. Sleep comes in fit, half dreams filled with broken names and soft screams, faces I've never seen but remember waking beside, mothers sobbing into the sky, fathers holding empty shoes, and over it all, the wind, chanting its litany of loss. Eli is quieter now, not frightened, curious. He watches me like he's waiting for me to do something I don't know how to do. He doesn't hear the wind anymore, but he remembers it. He tells me the house sounds different now. It's breathing, he said last night, brushing his fingertips across the hallway walls. Not scared, just tired. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I nodded. Me too. The Book of Winds won't close. I've tried. It stays open, pages flipping with unseen fingers. It's no longer just a record. It's a door. I think my father knew that. I think that's why he disappeared. He didn't go mad. He crossed over. The words on the pages change when I look away. Entire chapters vanish. Others bleed through. Some pages whisper. Some cry. And then last night, one bled. A thick bead of black ink bubbled up from the spine. It dripped down the margin like a tear. I touched it, and I saw her. A girl no older than Eli, standing in a storm that had no sky, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with wind. She held a name in her hands like a dying bird, and then it slipped away. The wind took it, and she screamed, not from fear but from emptiness. The vision snapped like a cord cut mid-note. I staggered back. The book closed itself. I need to go back, but not to the glade. That gate is closed now. What waits beyond it needs a different entrance. I remember something my father said once when I was 7. We were in the wood. He stopped beside a dry creek bed and whispered, "This place doesn't exist on maps. The wind draws it new each time." "Why?" I asked. "Because it needs to be lost to be found." At the time I thought he was just being poetic. Now I wonder if he was giving me direction. So I gather what I need. The book, a recorder, a photo of Eli, and a stone I found years ago that he gave me etched with a spiral I never knew meant anything. I write a note and leave it with my mother. Don't let him near the ridge. Not again. If I'm not back in 3 days, burn the book. Then I drive. I follow no roads, just instinct. A sense of pull, of gravity turns sideways. The sky flickers with stormlight. After hours I find it. Not a clearing, a breach. A split in the trees, narrow and pulsing with cold. I step through and the world bends. The colors change. The sound thickens. The wind doesn't howl here, it speaks. In sighs, in sobs, in songs made of memory. This place is not a place, it's a seam. I set the recorder down. "Who are you?" I ask the wind. It answers with my father's voice. "You already know." I kneel. "Why me?" Another voice now, my own, younger. "Because you listened. The totem may be gone, but something here knows me." The ground breathes. Trees bend toward me, bark groaning with unspoken truth. And then he appears, Micah. My father, but not like before, taller, wrapped in wind, his face translucent. "You crossed too far," he says. "Did you?" He nods. "I meant to watch, but the wind doesn't let you go, not when you speak its name." "Can I come back?" His eyes dim. "Not the same. Never the same." "What about Eli?" He kneels beside me, takes my hand. "He's free. You broke the chain, but you carry it now." I close my eyes, let the silence take me, and beneath it, a name, one I don't know, one the wind has lost. I whisper it, and the world opens. I don't remember walking through the opening. One moment, the name slipped from my lips like a confession. The next, I was inside something. Not a forest. Not quite. Not a cave either. A space folded inward, made of wind and memory. Layered like old paper and dreams. Every breath I took echoed. Every heartbeat whispered back. I kept walking. There were no paths, just instinct. Just pull. Just the sense that someone was waiting. The name I'd spoken pulsed through me. A hum in my chest. It didn't mean anything I could translate, but I felt it, grief shaped like light, sorrow shaped like shelter. I passed through a grove of trees without roots. They floated above the ground, swaying gently as if cradled by a lullaby only they could hear. Between their trunks, I saw glimpses. A boy crying on a staircase. A woman holding a phone she couldn't bring herself to dial. A man screaming into his hands on a beach with no waves. Each memory hung like mist, vanishing when I looked too long. This was not a place you could visit. It was a place you remembered backward. A voice called from ahead, not loud, not urgent, familiar. "Don't forget why you came." I followed. The trees thinned. The world tilted again, and suddenly I stood before a stone gate, tall, ancient,
with the spiral carved deep at its center. The wind blew through it, not around it, shaping a tunnel that led into shadow. I stepped through, and on the other side I was a child, 10 years old, kneeling beside my father in the clearing. He smiled at me. You asked if it ever answered. Do you remember? I do. You didn't understand the answer then. I think I do now. He placed his hand on my shoulder. It felt real, solid. Then you're ready. He stood, and the world shifted. The boy vanished. I was myself again, older, changed, and standing in a circle of stones, each inscribed with a name, not carved, sung. I could feel the vibration of each one. These were the names the wind had lost, names it carried for safekeeping, names it couldn't return until someone remembered them. I stepped forward, placed the Book of Winds at the center. It opened, pages fluttered, then stilled, a blank page, and my hand moved, not on its own but not entirely under my control either. I began to write, not words, names, each one etched itself into the book, and onto the stone. As I wrote, the wind grew louder, circling, weeping, rejoicing. The last name I wrote wasn't mine, it wasn't Eli's, it was a name I'd never seen before, never heard. But as I finished it, I knew it belonged to the girl I'd seen in the vision, the one who had lost her name in the storm. As I whispered it aloud, the wind screamed, then fell silent. A soft light filled the circle, and she stood there, her hands clasped, her eyes wide. I remembered, she said. Tears filled my eyes. So did I. She smiled, and then vanished like morning mist. The stones dimmed, the wind grew quiet, and the Book of Winds closed. My father stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder again. You can go now, he said. Will I forget? He hesitated. Some of it, but not the part that matters. And you? I'll stay, until the wind forgets no more. I turned, pulled him into a hug. He was warm, and then he was gone. Just air. I stepped through the gate, back through the folding forest, through the breach, and into the arms of my son. Eli was waiting. He didn't speak. He just hugged me so tight my ribs ached, and whispered, You came back. I always will, even if the wind remembers more than I do. The wind has grown still, not gone, just quiet, like it's waiting again. Eli sleeps more now, but peacefully. No dreams, or at least none he remembers. No whispers in the wall. No stories humming beneath the floorboards. He's lighter, unburdened, like a weight has been lifted from the sky itself and set gently beside him. But I feel it. I carry it. The Book of Winds sits on my nightstand, closed, still, but not silent. Some nights I wake to find it open, its pages rippling. Though there is no breeze, I don't read it anymore. Not because I'm afraid, because I know enough now, and knowing comes with its own gravity. Eli asked me yesterday, was Grandpa real? I paused, real enough to remember. He nodded like that made sense. Maybe it does. Maybe being remembered is the only proof of existence that matters. Maybe that's what the wind was trying to say all along, that to name something is to save it, even if it's just for a moment. I've started walking the ridge again, not just to the old trailhead, where the trees begin to lean in and the moss stains the rocks like fingerprints. The clearing isn't there anymore. Not like before. The breach has sealed, the spiral faded, but I still hear the breath of that other world in the way the trees One morning, I found a feather caught in the bark of a tree I didn't recognize, pale, almost transparent. When I touched it, it dissolved like mist, but I felt something in my chest tighten, then release, like a memory being let go. I think that was his way of saying goodbye. I've tried returning to normal. Work, errands, bills, I make lunch, I fold laundry, I answer emails, but something in me has changed shape. I speak slower, listen longer. Sometimes I wake with a name on my lips and write it down without knowing why. I've filled 2 names I don't recognize, names that don't belong to me. Maybe they're wind-touched, maybe they're echoes. Maybe this is what it means to be a keeper. Eli calls them the drift names. He says they feel like wishes someone forgot to make. Last night he asked me to tell a story, not a real one. He said, a true one. So I told him about the boy who listened too closely, who followed the wind, who gave away part of his name to save someone he loved. I told him about a forest that moves when it wants, and a gate carved from the breath of old storms, and a circle of stones singing forgotten names into the soil. He was quiet for a long time after. Then he said, I think I remember being there. Maybe you do, I told him, or maybe part of you never left. He looked at me. What about you? I didn't know how to answer, so I said the only thing that felt true. I'm still listening. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gone back. If I'd told Eli the wind was just the house settling. If I'd chosen reason over memory, logic over myth, how much I would have missed. How much of him I might have never seen. How much of my father I would have buried in silence. But I didn't. And now the wind knows my name. Now I know its voice. Not just the storm, not just the howl, but the hush after a child stops crying. The breath before a name is spoken. The silence after saying goodbye. It started again with a whisper. Not the wind. Not exactly. A sound tucked inside the ordinary hush of the house. Like a breath caught between waking and sleep. Eli heard it first. "Daddy," he said one early morning, blinking sleep from his eyes. "There's a name in my room again." I sat up instantly, heart already hammering. "What did it say?" He shook his head. "It didn't. It just waited, like it was hoping I'd remember it." We sat together in the half-light, both of us quiet, listening. Nothing came, just the creak of the settling house, and the soft rhythm of the rain against the windows. I told him it was probably a dream, but I didn't believe that. Later that day, I found one of my notebooks open on the kitchen table. I hadn't touched it in a week, but a new name was scrawled at the top of the page in my handwriting. NLL. Beneath it, "She was windborne, returned to silence before her story finished." I didn't remember writing it, but the ink was fresh. I closed the book, walked to the back porch, stared into the grey woods. The wind stirred the trees gently, as if unwilling to wake them fully. I whispered the name once, NLL, and waited. No response, no shift. But inside me, a tremble, a tug, like something calling me home. I told my mother about the name. She didn't flinch, just set her tea down slowly. "You're changing," she said. "Your voice, the way you move, even the way you look at things. You've stopped living in time like the rest of us." "I'm trying to be here," I said. "You are, but not all of you." She looked out the window. "That's how he started too." My breath caught. "Do you regret not believing him?" A pause. "Then every day." I didn't mean to go back to the ridge that night, but I found myself there anyway. The path was damp with mist. The trees pressed in closer than I remembered. They whispered too, not in words but in grief. At the base of the hill, the wind waited. It curled around my ankles like a cat, gentle, knowing. I sat where the stump used to be. I opened the Book of Winds, and for the first time in weeks, it showed me something new. A name I hadn't heard, but when I read it, I knew what it meant. The keeper who forgets. A short passage followed. He who carries the burden will begin to lose the names that matter most. Not all at once, but one by one. The wind must be paid, and memory is the price. My stomach turned. I stared at the name. My hands shook. I thought I had understood what I'd taken on, thought the worst had passed, but it hadn't even begun. I dreamed that night of Eli. Older, alone, calling out into the dark, "Dad," over and over. And the wind answering with silence. I woke choking on a sob I didn't recognize as mine. The next morning, I couldn't remember what he'd looked like in the dream. Not his face, not his voice, only the echo, only the fear. The next time Eli said, "Do you remember when we used to read on the porch?" I smiled and nodded, but I didn't, not completely. There was a blur, a warmth, a faint joy. But the details, the book, the day, the way he'd leaned against me, were already fading. The wind was taking the one memory at a time, and I had no idea how to stop it. I woke before the sun. The house was still. Eli was asleep in the next room, a soft snore slipping under his door like the whisper of a dream he hadn't let go of yet. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching the grey light crawl in through the blinds, and I couldn't remember the name of the street we lived on. It came back eventually, but the pause, it frightened me. The Book of Winds lay closed on the dresser. I hadn't opened it in days, but still it pulsed, like a second heart. Sometimes I thought it would stop beating if I just ignored it, but I knew better. It was part of me now, not a possession of me. I wrote a letter, not to Eli. He was too young, too knowing. I wrote it to the future. "If I forget too much," it read, "tell him I did it for the sound of his name in the dark, for the way he said daddy like it meant protection. Tell him I wanted him to remember me, even if I couldn't remember myself." I sealed it and placed it in the book. It accepted it, the way the wind accepts ashes. That evening Eli stood at the back door staring at the trees. The wind had returned, stronger now, not violent, but eager. "I think it's calling you," he said. I nodded. "I think it always was. Will you come back?" That question hurt worse than anything. I crouched beside him. "I don't know, but I'll leave pieces of myself where you can find them, in stories, in pages, in wind." He didn't cry, he just held my hand. "I'll remember for both of us," he said. I kissed his forehead. tasted salt and soil, and then I stepped out. The forest had changed again. It opened like a throat. The trail swallowed me. The trees bowed as I passed. I walked until there were no more footprints, until even the silence seemed hesitant. The breach appeared, a thin crack of golden light between two ancient pines. I stepped through. Inside, wind. Every direction, every voice. Names screamed and sung, whispered and wept. All of them searching, all of them asking to be held one more time. I stood in the center of it and closed my eyes. I remember you, I said. The wind stilled, just for a breath. Then one name returned, Eli. It echoed in my chest like thunder. I held to it, anchored myself with it, whispered it again and again, Eli, 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 and the wind began to soften. It flowed through me, not around, not over, through, carrying names, giving me back the ones that mattered, offering me a choice, keep forgetting, or carry them all. I chose. I opened my mouth, and I spoke the last name I'll ever say, my own, not to disappear, to be known. The wind roared, and then went quiet. Somewhere, a boy on a porch reads a story to the wind. The pages flutter, the trees bend low to listen, and the wind whispers, soft as breath. He remembered.